So Kevin, are you suggesting that we shouldn't be focusing on internal use cases as a way to kind of drive forward monitoring uptake?
I am.
Because I do kind of want to push back. I keep hearing this theme of like that our infrastructure team is different than everybody else out there, that like there's all these different personas, and I'm interested in hearing more about that. But from my perspective, having worked in monitoring for a bunch of years, having used monitoring tools, having seen kind of what they're doing, it's very standard stuff. I mean, the stuff that that Marin showed us last week, it was like basic look at a dashboard, drill down, overview, drill down workflow. And so I kind of question this narrative of that there's, that somehow driving adoption within our own group and serving that need, that explicit need now is kind of counter to what the market actually needs.
So my AirPods cut out, and I had to switch earphones. I heard, I think the basic gist of it, which is, are we saying that our use cases that we've identified internally is not the only way forward to increasing the adoption of our tooling? I think it's one of the ways, but I don't think it's the only way. And that's why the importance in what Dove pointed out in the beginning is like, what are the jobs to be done? There's many different ways to ultimately accomplish the same thing, which is to identify issues, production issues, and help triage them and make them go away quickly, or even prevent them from happening to begin with. There's lots of ways of doing it. And what we've been seeing is that we have set up a very specific way using the tools that our team has chosen to use. But
when you talk about that, are you talking about the metric dashboards or specifically, or what?
Talking specifically about the metrics dashboards that we have set up. There may be opportunities. I don't think we should stop there and saying, this is what we're solving, and we only solve them by replacing what they have now within GitLab. I rather approach, which is what Dove and Nadia have been doing, is like, what are the jobs to be done here? There may be other ways of thinking about it. It's not to say we don't want to serve our internal customers by any stretch of the imagination, but we have to look at it from the perspective of, they want to do this, so we can solve it. Here are the options that's available for us to solve this particular issue, so they can do that job. And it may not be a one-for-one.
Yeah, well, and I guess maybe what I'm not understanding is that seems like that's our existing strategy. It's like we've been focusing on the triage workflow. If you look at the features in that workflow, they're all the things that are happening in monitoring. It's dashboarding and incident management and alerting. We've been pushing forward on that with dog food as kind of the point of the spear there, and we're getting momentum on that, I'd say. And then now I think what's maybe feeling a little confusing or muddled from at least my perspective is kind of then we're looking to then set this next goal around that, around triage workflow, which, I mean, kind of the logical thing based on what we've been doing in APM is saying, okay, well, we've got some traction around metric dashboards. We're starting to get to the point where those are going to be used at least lightly internally. And so we're going to, then push to where that can be used seriously within the infrastructure team. And I think a lot of the stuff that's in the list is basically serving that. So it's all, maybe I'm not getting, it's like, it seems like we're kind of describing our existing strategy here. And then we're kind of debating really whether or not we should like.
I really think we are, but I would say there is Dove's statement, comment, and Dove, please feel free to jump in so I don't keep talking. Dog fooding is not a strategy. Dog fooding is a benefit that we want to carry along. To me, dog fooding, it's neither an objective nor a strategy. It's a
I
tactic
disagree
that
with that. I
help
would have pushed back
that
against that, but
please let me. So along the way, dog fooding is a great tactic to help us learn because it is the shortest path to getting feedback, and it's actually and proven really, really successful at GitLab. But at the end of the day, we're not building a product just for ourselves. We want to build a product that's useful for a lot of people. So by saying we are only dog fooding, even within a short period of time, I think it's dangerous because it may help us lose track of the other use cases and other ways of using tools to solve the triage workflow along the way. So I think the language of saying that we are focused on the triage workflow and not just having dog fooding as a sole goal is actually really, really important. And Dove, feel free to jump in if I'm misrepresenting your
I
thoughts.
think that by talking to the infrastructure team, we do have the luxury here to get like the feedback from like a first-hand user, but we need to look also on that user and their use case. And the fact of the matter is that they are Grafana power users, and they look at their workflow from one perspective, which is the metric. And this is because there is a group of engineers that are very familiar with Prometheus, with the metric use case. And I mean, we are lucky that we have those engineers, but other organization does not have those skill set. So
I
we
think
are
that's
looking at
not. I disagree with that. I mean, every organization I've worked in, I mean, what they're doing is the same thing that. It's very similar. And I mean, there was a blog post I posted this morning in the ops channel. Some Indian stock exchange company. It described exactly the same setup. They got Prometheus, they've got Grafana, they're using GitLab. So this idea that we have some very elite engineers in that team, but like, it's not like they're doing something in some different way than other people are doing it. Like, it's a very standard approach to monitoring and infrastructure and operations these days. And they're kind of, they're advanced, but also, in terms of the maturity spectrum of like where, companies are. I mean, we're working towards enterprise readiness. We're not really quite there yet in terms of how we do our ops. And so I think we're kind of right in the middle. I don't agree that like they're an outlier.
So the people that we are targeting today in the monitor stage, I don't think we should be targeting the operation team that need to monitor their mission critical services. Okay, we need to focus on the single developer. We need to focus on the small, medium businesses. This is where we need to start. We need to solve those use cases for them first, before we'll be able to say we can solve the use case for the large enterprise. This is what I'm coming from.
I think, I just not to get pedantic, but to say we're building a monitoring solution and our strategy is to not monitor business critical services. It's like, that's what monitoring is for. So that, at the very least is very, I think, uninspiring. And I think that, we can, there may be different personas to tease out here, but I think that, we should be pushing that. We should be focused on the workflow, in my opinion. I think that that's right. I think that's what we've been doing, and that we should be ambitious about that. Like, what we need is some confidence and credibility and progress, not a lot of discussion of kind of what the different kind of sub personas are. And I guess what I would love to see, I think that it's almost here in my mind, but what I think what's missing is that, like, we haven't really, I don't see any goal around this. It's like there's a strategy which is focused on triage. Part of that strategy, I think, is dog fooding, which to me is not just about feedback and learning. It's also about marketing. That if we can get our infrastructure team, who now is looked at as experts on how do you configure Grafana, how do you configure Prometheus, how do you monitor using this type of tech stack, if we get them actually using these tools fully, then I mean, that's a huge tool to be able to use to then drive adoption in the wider community. So I don't think, I mean, to me, it's not about we need to learn from them. It's like we need them to be, advocating for what we're building, because that's actually how you break through to those other customers. And the kind of what we need is a, then crisp goal. Like the goal is the goalpost. It can't be to focus on something. It has to be, we're going to turn off Grafana, or we're going to do something else. But, that I think that's what I'd like to see. So I'm maybe talking too much, but that's what I'd like to see.
I think that we are missing some critical but basic functionalities around monitoring before we can start working toward making sure that our info team will replace Grafana with our tool. I don't
So what's
disagree
the
that this
goal? I
is
mean,
not,
what's the goal there? I guess it's not just because we're missing it. That's the whole point, right? Is that we need
I
to
don't
then
disagree. I
build
don't
it.
disagree that dog fooding is important. I don't disagree that at the end of the day, eventually we would want to reach out and make sure that they will use our tool. But I think that by going and trying to make sure that they will use our tool, we are missing, like we are going so deep, but we are missing some basic features that are not there for the triage workflow. I can specifically tell you what are the missing features, but I don't think this is a good use of our time. I'm just saying that working only on dog fooding and making sure that dog fooding will dictate the product roadmap is not the right strategy at the moment. Maybe in like 3-4 iterations from now, maybe this is something that we can look at, but we need to be honest with ourselves. That's what I'm saying. And we have a user research that me and Nadia are doing. We're talking to some of our users, Grafana users. We see the differences. There is a triage workflow research that is undergoing on 13.0, so this iteration. So we know what we're starting to get the picture of what we are aiming toward. And we do see some differences between the requirements from the info team and the SRE, and the requirement from the common community.
The other thing I want to add, I think fundamentally, from both what Sam is saying now and what Dove is saying is, Sam, like your point about our infrastructure team not being an outlier, I don't think we're suggesting that they're an outlier. They're doing something really weird and different. They're a great example of someone who succeeded in solving how to use the tech stack to get what they want, to solve the jobs to be done that they need to get done. And we certainly, at the end of the day, we want to build our products to do that. And Dove's perspective is we're looking at our internal users, we're looking at outside users, and we're looking at jobs to be done and the workflow that we want to target. And we're doing this iteratively. And what Sam is asking for is like, yeah, of course, we've been saying this all along. What are the goals for Q2? Can we explicitly
I'm asking, yes, exactly. The goal, because you're describing activity there. You're saying we're doing these things, which is great. We should keep doing those things. We should keep iterating. We should keep doing research. We should keep developing, but that none of that is a goal. And so like, yeah, what is the goal for Q2 that we should focus and rally the team around? And if we're saying we don't know, then we should keep working on it. But if we have, 20 engineers or 10 engineers in this group that we're saying, well, we don't really, we're just going to focus on some stuff. We don't know what the goal is. That becomes very challenging from an engineering perspective then to drive results.
I think what you're looking for, so I want to tease out, there is a difference between like a vision further down the road for metrics is what we've been specifically talking about is as a GitLab user, you do not need to use Grafana because we offer most of the functionalities specific for GitLab users and what GitLab users want to do right within GitLab. That's worthwhile. That's a vision a few clicks down the road. For Q2, it's a shorter, a few iterations away. We want to define a goal. And since Dove has identified some of the things from requirements from Andrew, and I don't know what else fits in here, we can certainly define, like, by the end of Q2, we have certain set of accomplishments. Maybe it is like translating these requirements into specific dashboards that we will replace. Maybe it is like looking from it from the North Star metric perspective. We have said that it's about increasing the number of views for metrics and logs. What can we do about it that drives that forward? But I don't want to like just be like, the only thing for Q2 is replacing Grafana. What Dove is saying is, yes, we can move forward ambitiously, but that's not realistic. So what is realistic? We have other shorter iterative ways of getting there.
I don't know if we've established if it's
out.
realistic. I think actually a lot of us think it is realistic. It may be that we don't decide to go for it. We don't think it's worth doing, but I don't think we've established that it's not realistic.
I don't think that's true. So based on what Dove has done is we've taken all the requirements from Andrew to replace Grafana. And if you look at
but
that
Andrew
list,
doesn't set the requirements. And I mean, you've got, I'd say that you've got the folks on the engineering team saying, we think it's achievable.
okay.
And then you've got the product management saying, we don't know if it's achievable or we don't think it is. And so, you know, I don't think that that's established like, oh, it can't be done, it's unrealistic. We could talk about if it is a realistic goal, but I don't think that we can just say de facto, like, it's not realistic because of this level, you know, because of what we've done here.
So Andrew is the DRI for the dog fooding metrics. He is setting the requirements. So I didn't understand why you said that he's not setting the requirement. Then if not him, then who?
I think what he's done is he's provided a list of issues. He said, here's 15 things that I'd like to be fixed, and that's input into the requirements. But, you know, you don't, like, you ask customers what they want, but you don't just do what they say. And so in terms of then translating that into a goal or, you know, compelling set of milestones, I don't think we've done that. We've said there's a list of 15 things that Andrew has listed. We're going to tackle 3 of them. And like that, you know, that's not a, I think it's not a compelling goal. What I'd love to see is that we say, here's some ambitious outcome that we're going to achieve. I think turning off all the Grafana dashboards is one version of that. It's not the only one, but if we think that's not the right approach, like what's the goal around that we should shoot for, and how do we start to articulate that more clearly in terms of customer value, whether that's dog fooded or external customers, as opposed to like it's lists of features that we've closed out.
I want to provide some UX perspective here. So I think that's exactly what we're trying to do here. And that's what Dove is also advocating for us to not have 100% focus on solving problems for this one customer, and to make sure that we're spending sufficient effort on product discovery around solving problems for you know, our user. And our user is not just our infra team. We also have some other problems that we're trying to solve. For example, one example of that is working on instrumentation. So what we uncovered in the UX research that Dove and I have been conducting is that one of the big pain points of our users is instrumentation. So not all of our users are as advanced as our infra team, and instrumentation is not very well documented, and we see it, you know, it's a difficult process, so we see it as an obstacle. So there's an opportunity, for example, to explore how we can improve the process of instrumentation, and thus, you know, that ties into the triage workflow. So things like that. And I don't know exactly what it can look like, and how much of our focus should be on dog fooding, how much weight should we give to the problems that we're solving for the infra team. I think Dove can weigh in much more on that. But what I would like to see from the UX point of view is for us to make sure that we are getting sufficient information about all of our users beyond GitLab, and that we take that into consideration when making decisions about our roadmap. So our roadmap is not informed just by the infra team. And to do that, we kind of need to pause maybe and not commit to a whole quarter of work just trying to replace Grafana. That's like the main thing. And maybe further down the road, maybe that's something that we should do. It would be cool to do like an all hands on deck sprint. But at this point, it just feels like we don't have enough information about the other users to be able to confidently just dive into such a huge effort. That's how it feels to me.
And I think, I mean, that makes total sense from a research perspective to me. And like those seem like activities that should be ongoing. I think that's not a message that we want to bring to the engineering team to say, well, we don't really know. We're still, you know, we're researching different personas, and so we don't know what to do, and we're going to pause. You know, I also think that like it would be great if we could surface those customers. So like if we're saying, okay, we're not focused fully on, you know, on driving adoption in the infrastructure team because we also want to serve these other customers. Like, who are they? What are we trying to achieve with them? That you know, that I think would be very compelling as goal setting. If there are other groups we've identified, we see them using these features, we, you know, feel like there's ways to drive their usage forward, solve that problem, make that workflow more unified. But just to kind of assert that they exist, and you know, that again, that doesn't get us to a goal. And I think that the reality is that the organization over this next quarter is going to judge us in terms of dog fooding. That regardless of what OKR we set, there's going to be a question of, you know, are we driving that dog fooding initiative forward? And that, you know, that there's, I guess, a risk if we say, well, we don't want to do that anymore, or we're not going to focus fully on that, then, you know, that actually is how the success of the product gets judged, unless we can really put forward some other metrics that are compelling.
Couple questions. So what is the top-down OKR for next quarter?
From Sid, you mean, or?
So we had the.
I mean, it's IACV. OKR. It's broader. It's the broader product thing, and then it's best team or something. Is he's got a team focused one.
So from the product management perspective, is we're putting a lot of focus on the North Star metrics, and in my view, there's also OKR around increasing North Star metrics. So one way or the other, we're going to be judged on that as well. It's not just dog fooding. So that's.
So what's the North Star metric for APM?
The North Star metric for APM is views to metrics and views to logging. So that's something to keep in mind. And I really want to hear from Clement and Matt as well, because there is a sentiment that we don't have a goal, so we don't have confidence to move forward. Yes, I understand this. We should have goals that's crisply defined as much as possible. But what I'm hearing also is we have to approach this iteratively. And since we don't feel like we have all the information, we can't form crisply like we will accomplish this by the end of the Q2. As long as the team themselves between UX engineering and product are working hand in hand to identify those in an ongoing matter, I'm totally okay with us not having a top line sentence that by the end of Q2, we will do this. Because to me, like the more you talk, Sam, that's like what you're looking for, right? And if the team between engineering, Clement, Matt, Nadia, and Dove is saying, we know this is what we're doing, and we're continuing to gather information so that we can make the right next move. And gradually, hopefully that becomes like, we know even longer term where we're headed. To me, that's good. So I want to hear from Matt and Clement to see if there's like the same sense of like, we're really lost because we don't know where we're headed. If that's also the same feeling that you guys have.
I think for my perspective, APM covers a lot of ground, and it's easy to be pulled in multiple directions, and it's hard for me to prioritize engineering time and be focused on our execution to get results when there's no clear defined goal. So like 20% on logging is, it sounds great to like keep having a little bit on logs over time, but it's 20% of 8-9 people is a lot. And so it's also hard for me to strategically allocate people. So like having a senior engineer, we had senior engineers working on logging, and then the rest of the team working on metrics. And understanding the goals can help us prioritize maybe a less senior person on logging, so we can keep moving it forward rather than putting all our strategic engineers on something that maybe we want to spend a little bit less time. So I think that's part of it. I think that in the past the team also wasn't very clear where we're going, and that I think morale gets impacted a little bit too. We tried to do too much, and then also trying to balance expertise. Right. So the logging is one example. If we want to keep doing logging, I think I want to start, not only shifting the senior away from that, but also maybe training more people to have experience with logging, so that in case someone has like leaves GitLab or gets sick, like we can still move forward. And so trying to understand all those things help me make better decisions on how to execute better. So not necessarily have to be like a goal that we define set in stone, but just like a general direction, because right now it doesn't feel like it could be as defined as it could be from my perspective.
Yeah, I'll just echo what Clement said. I think, yeah, it's this wide-ranging scope of APM that we're trying to kind of grasp. So I agree with everything he said. I'm still trying to catch up on kind of where we are in some of the dog fooding efforts and stuff. But yeah, having some goals of the end, where we're heading, I think is very helpful to help kind of make some of those engineering manager type decisions of who should be working on what, and how many people should we allocate, and what can be delivered in each milestone.
Yeah, like an example could be like for other product areas, we say like, hey, we want to get minimal or viable by a certain time. Like it could be something more generic like that. But since we have featured categories, but we also have workflows, and workflows don't seem to have a category maturity, it's a little bit ambiguous to understand as well.
It may be also, I mean, that in terms of dog fooding, and if we're talking about OKRs here, I mean, that may be more of a key result than an objective. The objective may be to get the workflow to a certain level of maturity or, usability. And then a key result of that might be that, it's used or allows, shutting off some other workflow in the infrastructure team or in another group.
Does that help?
Yeah, thank you for your perspective. Appreciate it.
Okay, so we're almost at time, and we didn't reach any conclusion yet. And
Well, are we all aligned on that, on the value of having the goals? I think Clement, said it really well, probably much better than I did. But that regardless, we don't have that perfectly defined now. We're iterating, that's fine. But like, do we agree that is desirable to have that kind of goal, for at a quarterly and monthly level in place.
Absolutely. But I also think that like a goal is something that needs to be realistic.
Needs to be, sorry.
Needs to be realistic. I'll be more than happy to set
Yeah.
a goal, and by the end of Q2, let's replace Grafana. But I know it's not realistic.
Yeah. Well, and what I'll just push back a tiny bit on that, where with the OKRs here, they're actually not, there's two types of OKRs. There's committed OKRs where you say you have to achieve this, it's important. And then there's ambitious OKRs, and we only do ambitious ones here. So like you're actually, you know, in the GitLab way of doing things, it's okay to not hit the goals. Like, I mean, we should try to get, you know, 80%. If you get 100, that's fine. Although people will say, oh, maybe you weren't ambitious enough. But, you know, I think that, you know, when in our discussions about it, and when I talked to Kevin about it, you know, if we were to focus on Grafana, just theoretically as that goal, we might say our goal is to turn off 100%. If we got to 80, I mean, that'd be great. You know, if we got to 40, maybe not as great, but, you know, like still a lot of progress. So I think that, you know, we shouldn't be approaching them from a perspective of like, these are commitments, but more that, you know, this is kind of the rallying cry and like the vision and objective for the team. And, you know, so if we can really push and hit it, you know, 100%, great. But like, it's better to have an ambitious goal and fall a little bit short than to, you know, have a kind of safe goal that, you know, doesn't really drive progress in the same way.
This makes sense to me. For UX, I know I can say that it would also be very helpful to have a well-defined goal. It helps zero in on specific problems that we need to solve right now. I think that really helps everyone. But it would be great if the goal that we're setting would also address some other critical parts of the workflow that Dov mentioned. We haven't discussed in all detail, again, what it should look like. So again, there is more uncertainty, and I can't say anything more specific about that. But yeah, I don't know. I also see the coding as more of a tool that we would use to reach a certain point, but it shouldn't be probably the only thing that we're focusing on for as long as a quarter.
Okay.
Thanks. Yeah. Yeah. Again, I'd see the dog fooding more as like a proof point. You know, that, I mean, that's, you know, it also, yeah, I agree. It maybe I wasn't really clear about this before. I don't think it should be the only focus, but it's more, you know, the reason that you hear Sid talk about turning off one dashboard is that, you know, at the point where we've turned off a Grafana dashboard, is no longer available. We've kind of, there's a proof point there. It's like, you know, that there's something, you know, that something's been produced, even if there was lots and lots of other things that had to go into that. And so I think that, you know, that can be kind of a key part of the goal setting, and like a result where you say, well, you couldn't turn off all of Grafana until you've built a pretty nice dashboarding system that's usable, or else there'd be a lot of, you know, there'd be an uprising. And so, you know, the fact that we've done that, that's not really the goal, but like it proves that we've, you know, we've delivered value.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. I suggest we will wrap it up for today. I mean, we are at time.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, maybe just the action item, we just do another round. We can do another round async.
Yeah.
I'm going to try to, I need to have the engineering like section OKRs in, or sub-department, excuse me, OKRs in by end of this week. So I'm going to be working on those today and, you know, throughout the week. But yeah, maybe, you know, it'd be great to be able to kind of align those, say like, you know, we've got, you know, similar or same objectives, even if we're measuring it differently depending on function. But yeah, so do another round on it. Like we try to crisp it up over the course of this week, best we can. Kevin?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Just let's do it async. It's clear that we need to have a written statement that's crisp and that's aligning. And at the end of the day, I don't think we're that far apart from everything that happened in this conversation. It's just like, we know we need to move forward. We know we generally want to enable our infrastructure team, and we know we got the larger triage workflow that we're tackling, which involves not just metrics, and includes more things. And at the end of the day, we have a small team. We need to get them to work on the most important thing. So,
and articulate what that is to them. I think, I mean, the working backward, you know, MR that you got in, you know, I think that yeah, you could think of what's written in there as like another test of like, is this a good goal? It's like, ideally this is, you know, whatever we come up with here, you know, Clement and Matt can bring it to the engineering team and they'll be like, oh yeah, you know, we're excited about it. Like we see, like that would be great when we release, you know, X, Y, or Z, or we can say, you know, infrastructure team is using it for this. And so I think that, you know, that's part of the value here too, is that if we can take that list of things we want to do, we can take the strategy, and then we can, like, you know, present it as something that is compelling and inspiring to that group, then it really helps, you know, prioritize, it helps focus, it helps, you know, it is really important there. So the excitement of the team, I guess, would be, you know, just one kind of piece of feedback around, is it a compelling goal?
Cool.
Dov,
So
you probably got to get
gonna...
to say, what time is it in Israel now? I'm scared to ask.
It's 8 o'clock. It's like rush hour.
Yeah.
So we're going to continue the conversation on the issue then, async this week?
I would say, I would suggest the following. I'd love for Dove to be the DRI to put forth the compelling statement to the team, if that's okay with Dove. And then we can iterate with him on the issue. Yeah. And aim to wrap it up by midweek this week, because Dove is off starting Wednesday. So basically the next 2 days.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Cool. Well, thank you. Thank you for the honest conversation. I know it's not always easy. Appreciate everyone's input here.
Yeah, thanks for setting this up. I agree. I think it was really useful. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.